We actually met kind of a couple of weeks ago. You happened to be at an event where I was giving my little 10% happier spiel with your beautiful children. And I asked in advance, can I swear? And you're like, oh yeah, they've heard it a million times.
Well, as I like to say, my husband and I were artists, so we use all of our language to express ourselves.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We're expecting our first child, and I'm going to use that excuse as well. In fact, I sometimes say that now that I'm about to be a dad, I think that the first sentence in my next book is going to be, everything in my last book was bullshit. So tell us about yourself. How did you get into television?
It's interesting enough. You mentioned Northwestern, and I went to Medill, which I absolutely love, and really thought, that I knew I wanted to be a writer young in life. I just didn't know how I would have a career, and the only really career options it seemed were journalism. And so I wanted to go to the best school. I ended up at Northwestern. The interesting thing, really quickly, is just that I was in school at the time of the Gary Hart scandal, and it coincided with also where business was in journalism. And I didn't really think that journalism was the place to sort of get those in-depth stories, and really sort of focused on what Medill was teaching us, which is that.
I mean, look, I agree. Journalism sucks.
So sorry. However, I also went on an internship, and I also really quickly realized telling stories about what I thought was relevant was hard to pitch and get seen. And so I chose a harder career of Hollywood and decided that I would tell my stories. And I get to also comment on them. You're not supposed to do that in journalism, although I think that has lost some of that as well. So anyway, I chose screenwriting. I chose a way of sort of turning my lens toward the things that I thought were missing in the landscape of not just television, but that is America's biggest commodity, is marketing images. So it's very powerful. But anyway, I was missing, and everything I thought was interesting was missing. And so I wanted to sort of paint in and fill in some of that negative space.
That's really, when you say you were missing, what do you mean by that?
It's interesting. But I looked at television. I just didn't see myself. I certainly related to some things that were happening on television, but it's almost in some instances more damaging to be invisible to society. Like I didn't even see as an extra in the background of a TV show someone that looked like me, and the absence of is very damaging to the psyche when you don't see yourself. I mean, from the moment we are born, we want to be validated. Mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, see me, see me, see me. And as the theater, books, television, magazines, periodic, newspapers, even the stories that get shown on the news, and our dramas, our comedies, our reality shows, our movies, those are reflections of us. And if you don't see yourself in that, you start to question your humanity. And also, you don't show up. It's almost like, well, if no one sees me, then do I matter? Do I not matter? Those are subtle damage. Those are very damaging things that are happening, I think. But it's subtle, but it has a lifelong, lasting impact.
So do you think our culture has gotten better at that? Do you see yourself now in the culture? I mean, you're creating culture.
I like to think, are we getting better? Yes. Do we have a long way to go? Yes. The interesting thing, however, I find is I appreciate the intro, because oftentimes no one wants to toot their own horn, but it's funny, I've been saying forever, we're very successful. The interesting thing is that most people don't see me as successful, but I'm very successful. I live a very successful life. Within my industry, I'm seen as successful. Within my audience, I'm seen as successful. But it's very interesting, when I was walked out on the stage, I felt like, oh, it was my first time on a talk show, like the way I imagined maybe with success I would get one day, or at least my actors on my show would get one day. I would know what it felt like. But those sort of institutions, TV, the machine that creates success, talk shows, magazines, covers of magazines, a spread in a magazine or a periodical, or billboards, these things that say success, I have not really benefited from or participated in, not because I don't want to, or the Emmys or the Oscars or those things. You're not invited to those parties, but I am very successful.
Well, I mean, those numbers are impossible to argue with. Why? What is going on that these, I would agree, these are fair measures of success, that, or at least validation of success. Why are you and your casts not seeing that?
Well, it's interesting because I think even my success is categorized as the edge of something, or giving the theme of edges, or the type of shows or characters that I'm talking about are considered the edge. My actors are African American mostly, or women mostly. Women and African Americans are on the edge. Latinos are on the edge of society, supposedly, but we're not. We are here. And the interesting thing is, I actually think white male perspective, which has dominated culture in general, even if you're black or a woman or Asian or Latino and you adopt white male sensibilities, there is a lack, that is the disservice that they're doing only to themselves and the institutions that they're running, because what they don't even realize is that the edge is becoming the middle, and we are American, and we're here.
Yeah.
And so I actually think if you have that mentality, you're going to wake up one day, you being that fit in that box, you're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, I didn't know all these people were here and then had all these wonderful things to say and are having all these issues. But we're here. We're not going anywhere. It's not a accident that women's issues and women's education and the abuse of women and domestic violence and in our country, sex trafficking. There's 300,000 cases of young girls and boys, and Americans, being sex trafficked in our country. However, we think that's happening in Russia somewhere, and it's here. And there's no mistake that these issues are coming up in our country because they're here, and you cannot keep the rug on top of these issues. There's no mistake that we're still talking about Ferguson. These issues are here, and you're either going to address them in a sort of holistic way, in a way that we can sit down and communicate, or you're not. And then people are going to make you talk about it because it's here. And I think that's the interesting thing, that a big shift in my career was I used to want to be on prime time. I wanted to be on NBC, ABC, CBS. I wanted to be at the Emmys. Or feel like I needed, actually, maybe that's a better way to say it. I felt like that was the goal for my career. And once I stopped chasing after what success was defined as, I became I've had a larger success than I imagined. My husband and I, we broke cable records, and we still hold the cable record when our show that was canceled, which is not successful in our industry, 2 years later was premiered on BET, what can be considered a not successful, even saying in sort of the mainstream culture of entertainment, a sort of edge peripheral on the periphery network. We broke cable records for being 7.7 million viewers tuned in to that show that was 2 years off the air. And that record was the ad-supported cable TV premiere. And I'm very proud of that. And I share that with the audience that got us there. Which brings me to, I know you didn't ask me the question, but I'm gonna keep going. But which brings me to my bigger issue too is net neutrality. I think that's an issue that we have to protect. Otherwise, that is how, it's a very powerful tool that we equally get to share ideas. Even this conference is about the sharing of ideas, but the internet allows us to equally share ideas at the same pace. That, if you go online, you'll see in that space, I'm very successful. That's where my talk show is. That's where the cover of my magazine is. That's where, that's where those sort of markers of success exist for me and my company.
I'd love to just back up just a little bit. Can you tell us about what the two shows that we talked about on BT, what are they about? What's the plot? Who are the stars?
Being Mary Jane stars Gabrielle Union, and it's interesting. I wanted to use a little bit of my investment my mother put into me in Medill, and so I made my main character a cable news anchor. I also wanted to, the idea that she reports the news and tells everyone else's stories, so I wanted to make sure that we pull back the curtain and told her story. Now, we've heard that before in television. It kind of sounds like, oh, we're going behind the curtain of a woman's life. I'm excited that we've broken the walls down, or the rules. It's not a procedural, it's nothing like that. It literally is what is it like being Mary Jane? And it follows her love life, her family life, her work life, and her alone moments. I find it very interesting that we talk about single people, but we often don't see them alone. And so it really sort of explores her humanity. And it also allows me it's a platform for things that I want to talk about, like I mentioned sex trafficking and things like that. It's an easy way to talk about some of the issues I wanted to talk about when I entered into Medill.
And the game?
And the game, thank you. The game, I'm very proud of it. We just announced this is going to be our last. We're in a production cycle right now for our last season, and it's the first time in my career we get to sort of celebrate that success. But it's 147 episodes of the women behind the men of football, and it's sort of the idea that I remember. I love sports, but I always used to love when the camera would pan and see whose mother was who, whose girlfriend was who, whose wife was who, and so. Just with that curiosity, I created this world called The Game, and it's a comedy that's really more of a dramedy. We take our moments. We've sort of been defining it as we want to, and we've been very successful with 2 networks and 147 episodes. It's been.
I mean, it's a great idea. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Well, since we're on the theme of edges, you can interpret this question however you want. How do you push the edges creatively?
Well, it's interesting. I love to attack stereotypes. I love to draw the viewer in with images that they believe they know already, and I like to sort of dismantle them because, of course, I don't want to perpetuate one. I certainly want to sort of dismantle it and try to get to the humanity of things. In doing so was what I find very interesting because my core audience loves the term positive image, and I actually do not. I don't believe in positive images, just as though I don't believe in negative images. I think they can be actually just as damaging as negative images, in that it erases our ability to have humanity. And it's funny, Naomi was just talking about we are a lot in between positive and negative. We have stories. We make mistakes. We are a lot of things, and that is to be celebrated. Or to be understood, if not celebrated, at least understood, or hopefully can have compassion for. I cannot be perfect, and I'm not evil, but I am something in between. And I think it's time for even the African American audience, which has been primarily my demographic, and even women who want. I understand why they want positive images. They want it because society has basically seen them as on the edge, and so they don't want to be seen as something negative. They want to be seen as something positive. But I don't agree with that. It's time to just put it out there. This is who we are. Deal with it.
I think anybody who's considered what you've achieved already and listened to you speak for the last 15 minutes will conclude that you can do anything you want. So in that spirit, what do you want to do next? What's your dream?
It's very interesting. My children are here, and they have inspired me a great deal. When I sit in meetings, I often say, "Oh, if you want, modern women, complex women, I'm top. I'm top on the list. If you want African American culture, I'm top of the list." But now they have inspired me because I love Star Wars, which I'm so excited that George Lucas is here. And I did not know that was all sort of happenstance. I mean, coincidental or not. That I want to get into sci-fi. I want to do action heroes. I mean, I love Ahsoka Tano. I mean, we watch the Clone Wars, like that's the show that we watch all the time together. And those two guys have inspired me the most. I actually watched Star Wars again, and not just because Princess Leia's hair was cute. I mean, now I know what's going on, and I really enjoy it. And actually been having some meetings with DC Comics and talking about, maybe putting some of my, doing a mashup of the modern woman with some of their images too. I mean, their characters too. So that'd be fun.
So big things.
Hopefully.
I want to be here to witness it. In fact, I want to be the person who interviews you on a real talk show.
I would love that. You said it.
There are some young people here. I've talked to a bunch of them backstage with the CIW youth program. What would you say to them about figuring out what it is you want to do and then going for it?
Ooh.
Because you did it.
I did. There's many ways to skin that one, but I will say, I think as a young person, it's very important that you first give back to yourself. A lot of people, let's just say for writers, they say they're writers, but they don't write. They'll say, oh, but I got to go to school and I've got to do a job, and that's true, but you have to understand that those things are the things that are supporting the dream. So you have to do those to survive. That's survival. The thing that you want to do, you have to do it. So they have to carve out 4 hours of time, 4 hours a day of writing. So then that's going to cut into what? Probably social time and things like that. Well, those are the sacrifices that you have to think about. I don't call them investments, maybe is a better way to say they do now. And then the second thing I would say to that is who you surround yourself with. If you have, I often tell young people, if you have a dramatic boyfriend or girlfriend that's just killing you of your time, you really got to get rid of them. I mean, you don't have time for that. If you are drinking too much and can't wake up to hit those 4 hours or whatever, partying too much, just pull back. Just have one drink. I mean, there's really just about those sort of things. And oftentimes as creative people, we are, or even to the point where you're saying figuring out what you want to do, we don't, and I'm really not trying to do this because you're here, Dan, I promise. We don't sit with ourselves. We're not still enough to hear the voice inside of us. You talk about meditation, which was, it's a beautiful experience. I think sometimes it's just a moment for me to even just hear myself, because we're just so busy getting the to-do list done, that your spirit talks to you, it gets the ego out of the way, so your spirit can say, remember me, this is what I want to do, and sort of be led by that, that voice.
I love how you brought it right back to me. That's just.
I'm trying to get that talk show.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, she's playing me. She's playing me.